Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
You know how sometimes it feels like you're just bombarded with all this climate change news and it's hard to get past the
Oh,
headlines?
yeah, definitely. I feel like everyone's feeling that these days, right?
Like, we need to do something, but it's hard to see the forest for the trees sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's what we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, so today we're tackling a really important question.
hmm
Why is global action on climate change so difficult?
It's a big one.
It is a big one.
Yeah,
And to help us do that, we're diving into this episode of Climate Conversations.
right. I think they framed it in a really interesting way.
Yeah, they made a really good point right off the bat that the science on this is super clear.
Yeah, it's not even really up for debate anymore.
No, and the effects of climate change, I mean, we're seeing them more and more often.
Every time you turn on the news, it seems like there's another hurricane or a wildfire or a heat wave.
Right, and it's not just like a coincidence anymore, right? These are all connected to this bigger issue.
Exactly. And the science backs that up, too. But here's the thing. Even with all of that knowledge and the evidence right in front of us, the global response has been, well, I think disappointing is an understatement.
Yeah, it feels like we're kind of dragging our feet as a planet.
A little bit, yeah. It's this strange paradox.
Mhm.
We understand the problem, we know the urgency, but large-scale action, it's just not happening fast enough.
And this episode really digs into some of the reasons why that is.
And there are a lot of them.
There are. It's not just one simple answer, is it?
Oh, not at all. It's this whole tangled web of different factors all kind of working together to slow things down.
So it's almost like a puzzle that we have to solve.
In a way, yeah. And the episode we listened to breaks it down into a few key areas. There are the economic factors holding us back then, there's the whole political landscape, and of course we can't forget the social and informational aspects of it all.
So it's not just about the science or the technology. It's about people and politics and money.
Yeah, it's about all of it,
I
unfortunately.
don't, when you put it like that, it's almost kind of,
Overwhelming.
yeah, a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, I get that.
Like, where do you even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is by understanding those different obstacles that we talked about.
Okay, yeah, let's break them down one by one.
Sounds good to me.
So let's start with the economic roadblocks. I think it's pretty easy to see how big changes can be scary, especially when it comes to something as big as the entire global economy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the episode really emphasized that fear that some governments have about taking drastic climate action.
Right, like they're worried about tanking their economies.
Which, on the surface makes sense. Nobody wants to be responsible for crashing the economy, right?
Right.
Hmm.
But then again, don't you think the cost of not acting could end up being even worse in the long run?
Oh, there's no question about that. We're already starting to see the economic impacts of climate change, and it's only going to get more expensive the longer we wait.
Yeah, those climate disasters we talked about, they're not cheap to deal with.
All right, and those costs, they're only going to go up if we don't get a handle on this.
So it seems kind of short-sighted to be so focused on the potential economic downsides of climate action when the alternative is potentially much worse.
You would think so, right? But it's not always that simple, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess it's never that simple, is it?
Not when it comes to something this complex.
So if it's not that simple, then what else is going on here?
Well, one thing the episode pointed out is that it's not just governments making these decisions.
Hmm.
We also have to consider the influence of really powerful industries, especially those in the fossil fuel sector.
Right, they've got a lot to lose if we shift away from oil and gas.
Exactly. And they have a long history of lobbying really hard against any changes that they see as a threat to their business.
So it's like a classic case of short-term profit over long-term sustainability.
Pretty much.
Ah,
And unfortunately, their short-term profits often come at the expense of the planet's long-term health.
and it's not just about the fossil fuel industry either, right? There are probably other industries that are resistant to change as well.
Well, absolutely. Any industry that's heavily reliant on fossil fuels or practices that are harmful to the environment is going to be hesitant to make big changes.
So we've got this kind of like economic inertia holding us back.
Exactly. And that inertia, it's connected to the political obstacles that the episode talks about, too.
Oh, right, because if governments are worried about the economic impact of climate action, and then you've got these powerful industries lobbying against change, well, it makes it that much harder to get anything done, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's like trying to swim upstream.
And the episodes specifically mention inconsistent policies around the world as a big part of the problem.
Yeah, it's a real mess. When you look at the global stage, some countries are stepping up and making big commitments to things like renewable energy.
Which is great.
It is. But at the same time, you've got other countries that are just dragging their feet, prioritizing immediate economic gains over the long-term health of the planet.
So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Exactly.
Ah.
And the episode actually used the United States as an example of this kind of back and forth.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, they talked about how the U.S.'s stance on climate change has been kind of a roller coaster over the years, with different administrations taking very different approaches.
Yeah, that's definitely been true, hasn't it? Like one administration will come in and make climate change a top priority, and then the next one will come in and kind of reverse course.
Exactly. And that kind of inconsistency, it makes it incredibly difficult to make any real progress on a global scale because other countries are looking to the U.S. for leadership.
Right. So if the U.S. isn't sending a clear and consistent message, then it makes it harder to get other countries on board.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house on a foundation that's constantly shifting.
So it sounds like global cooperation is a really important part of this.
It's absolutely essential. We can't tackle a global problem like climate change without every country working together.
But that's easier said than done, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially when you have countries with different priorities and different economic interests.
And then you throw in the whole idea of national sovereignty, and it gets even more complicated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like everyone agrees that something needs to be done, but nobody wants to be the one to make the first move.
So what happens then? We just end up in this stalemate?
That's the danger.
Hmm.
And the episode actually used a really interesting concept to describe this kind of situation. They called it the tragedy of the commons. Have you ever heard of that?
I feel like I have. Vaguely. It might have been back in my college economics class.
Oh yeah, it's a classic economic principle.
But I definitely don't remember all the details. Could you maybe give us a quick refresher?
Sure, yeah. So it's like this, imagine a bunch of farmers all sharing the same pasture land for their cows.
Yeah, I'm picturing it.
So they can all graze their cows there,
Right.
but there's only so much grass to go around, right?
Right.
The best thing for everyone would be to share the land sustainably, so there's enough grass for all the cows in the long run.
Makes sense.
But here's the thing. Each farmer is thinking about their own herd. They want their cows to eat as much as possible so they can make more money.
Yeah, I see where this is going.
And if they're not careful, they end up overgrazing the land and then nobody has enough grass and everyone loses out in the end.
So it's like a classic case of self-interest versus the common good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's kind of what's happening with climate change on a global scale. We're all sharing this one planet, but it's tough to get everyone on the same page about how to take care of it.
Because everyone's worried about their own interests, whether it's economic growth or national security or whatever.
Right. And those economic and political factors that we were talking about earlier, they feed into that dynamic, making it even harder to break out of that cycle.
So it's not just about the science, it's about human nature in a way.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And the episode we listened to, they made another really important point about this whole thing.
What's that?
It's not just economics and politics that are holding us back. There's this whole other layer to the problem, the social and informational side of things.
Oh, right. Like how we even talk about climate change and what information is out there.
Exactly. It's like this whole other dimension to the issue. And honestly, it can be one of the most frustrating parts of the whole thing.
Because sometimes it feels like we can't even agree on what the problems are, let alone how to fix them.
Totally. And the episode really highlighted how information or sometimes misinformation about climate change spreads. It's like a constant flood of news and opinions and data.
And not all of it is accurate, right?
Unfortunately not. And it can be hard to sort through all the noise and figure out what's true and what's not.
Yeah, especially with social media these days. It feels like everyone's got an opinion and they're not afraid to share it, whether it's based on facts or not.
Absolutely. And the episode talked about how that constant stream of information it can create this sense of confusion and apathy. Like people just get overwhelmed and tune it all out.
Which I get. It's a lot to process sometimes.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then you add in things like misinformation and outright climate denial, and it gets even more complicated.
Oh, yeah. That's something they brought up in the episode, too, right? About how climate denial has been a really effective tactic for some groups who want to delay action.
Exactly. Because if you can convince people that the problem isn't real or that it's not that big of a deal, then it's a lot easier to just keep doing things the way we've always done them.
Right. Even if those ways are literally destroying the planet.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a really dangerous game they're playing.
It's scary how long that's been going on, too. Like, we've known about the dangers of climate change for decades, and yet there are still people out there actively trying to discredit the science.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, especially when you see the evidence right in front of us. The record-breaking temperatures, the intense hurricanes, the wildfires. It's like they're ignoring reality.
So it feels like we're up against a lot here. We've got the economic interests, the political maneuvering, and then this whole other battle over information and what people believe.
It's a lot. And honestly, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all. Like, how can we possibly make a difference when there are so many forces working against us?
Yeah, I definitely feel that way sometimes. But this episode, they didn't just leave us feeling depressed and hopeless, did they? There were some glimmers of hope too, right?
Yeah, definitely. They made a point of highlighting some of the positive things that are happening,
Mhm.
like the growing movement of young people who are demanding action on climate
Oh,
change.
yeah. Those guys are awesome. They're not just sitting around waiting for someone else to fix it. They're out there marching and protesting and holding leaders accountable.
Exactly. They're fired up and they're not backing down. And it's not just young people either. There are a lot of grassroots organizations and community groups who are working hard to make a difference.
So there is some hope. Maybe things are starting to shift.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's not just about passion and activism either. We're also seeing incredible innovations in things like renewable energy and sustainable technology.
So it's not just about giving up everything we enjoy. It's about finding new and better ways to do things.
Exactly. And those solutions are out there. We just
Mhm.
need to be willing to invest in them and implement them on a larger scale.
That makes me think of something you said earlier about the whole tragedy of the commons idea.
Yeah, what about it?
Well, if the tragedy happens when everyone acts in their own self-interest, then maybe the solution is to start thinking about the collective good.
You know, that's a really good point. It's like flipping the script on the whole thing. Instead of asking, what's best for me, we need to start asking, what's best for all of us.
Exactly. Because we're all in this together, right?
We are. Whether we like it or not, this planet is the only home we've got.
So it's not just about changing light bulbs or remembering your reusable bags anymore.
Right. It's bigger than that.
Yeah.
Those individual actions are still important, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Every little bit helps. But to really move the needle, we need to be thinking about system-level change.
So what does that look like?
Well, for starters, it means putting pressure on our elected officials to make climate change a top priority.
Because they're the ones who can actually implement those big system-level changes.
Exactly. We need strong, consistent policies that hold industries accountable and invest in things like renewable energy.
And that probably means global cooperation too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This isn't something that any one country can solve on their own. We need everyone working together.
Which is a pretty tall order considering.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. There's no denying that.
Mm.
But the Climate Conversations episode, they made a really interesting point about this.
What's that?
They said that even though those big policy changes are crucial, individual actions still matter.
Really? But how? I mean, if it's a global problem, how much of a difference can one person really make?
Well, think of it this way. Every time you choose to buy a product from a sustainable company, or you vote for a candidate who prioritizes climate action, you're sending a message
A message to who?
to everyone.
Yeah.
To businesses, to politicians, to your friends and family. You're saying, this is what I value. This is the kind of world I want to live in.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values.
Exactly. And when enough people do that, it creates this ripple effect that can actually start to shift those societal norms and expectations.
That's actually pretty powerful when you think about it.
It is. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of something as big and complex as climate change. But we're not. We all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future.
So where do we even begin? What are some practical steps that people can take?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed. Educate yourself about the issue and the different solutions that are out there.
Don't just get stuck in the doom and gloom.
Exactly. There's a lot of hope out there, too. And once you're informed, talk about it. Have conversations with your friends and family, your coworkers, your elected officials.
Because those conversations, they can lead to action.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to demand more from the people and businesses that you support.
Right. Vote with your dollars and your votes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all makes a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's so important that we're having these conversations because the more we understand about the challenges, the better equipped we'll be to find solutions.
Couldn't agree more.
So to wrap things up for today, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. We've talked about a lot of different obstacles to global action on climate change, but what do you think is the single biggest one?
That's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
And once you've identified that obstacle, what role do you see yourself playing in overcoming it? It's something to think about.
Definitely. And remember, even small actions can have a big impact.
That's right. Thanks for joining us for another Deep Dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep diving deeper, everyone.